The story of Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire is one of the most captivating sagas in the history of the world. It is a tale woven through centuries, with incredible triumphs, shifting allegiances, and the rise and fall of one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. To understand Caesar's legacy is to understand the forces that shaped the rise of Rome from a modest city-state to the dominant power of the Mediterranean world. This narrative begins far before the birth of Caesar himself, in the 8th century BCE, with the foundation of Rome. According to legend, the city was founded by Romulus, its first king, and for centuries it remained a small, struggling community. Yet, over time, through sheer determination and the brilliance of its military and political strategies, Rome began to expand. The Roman Republic was born, and with it, a political system that would become the model for future civilizations. As we drift through the centuries, we witness Rome's gradual but relentless ascent, aided by its fierce legions, exceptional engineering skills, and sophisticated legal system. The Roman Republic became a powerful force, but with this power came internal strife. The complex dynamics of Roman politics, brimming with corruption, power struggles, and betrayals, created an environment ripe for the rise of charismatic leaders, among them Julius Caesar. Born into the patrician Julii family, Julius Caesar's early years were marked by the political instability that characterized Rome at the time. His rise to power was not inevitable. It was the result of his extraordinary ambition, political savvy, and military genius. He was a master of both warfare and diplomacy, skills that allowed him to ascend through the political ranks, eventually crossing the Rubicon and declaring himself the sole ruler of Rome. Caesar's transformation from general to dictator marked the end of the Roman Republic and set the stage for the rise of the Roman Empire. But his reign, though short-lived, was revolutionary. Through a series of reforms, Caesar reshaped Roman society, altering everything from the calendar to the structure of the Senate. Yet, his rapid rise to power and the way he consolidated control sowed the seeds of his eventual downfall. His assassination in 44 BCE by a group of senators, including those he once considered allies, signaled the end of an era for Rome. As we delve deeper into this history, we will explore the intricate details of Julius Caesar's life, from his early days as a soldier and politician to his military campaigns in Gaul, his rise to power in Rome, and the dramatic political changes he instituted. We will also examine the cultural and societal impacts of Caesar's reign and how the legacy of his rule helped lay the foundation for the Roman Empire under his adopted heir, Augustus. As we move forward in time, we will also reflect on the broader history of Rome itself, the grand cities, the triumphs of its military conquests, and the lives of everyday Romans. Rome was a city of wonders, with impressive architecture, sophisticated urban planning, and a culture that balanced the aspirations of the elite with the realities of life for its citizens. From the majestic Forum to the mighty Colosseum, we will journey through these landmarks, bringing the ancient city to life in your mind. Yet, even as we reflect on the glory of ancient Rome, it is crucial to remember that history is never just about monuments and military victories. It is also about the people, the generals, the senators, the philosophers, and the citizens who lived in this complex society. Their stories, sometimes forgotten, sometimes immortalized, form the true tapestry of the Roman Empire. In the chapters that follow, we will explore Julius Caesar's life and the world around him. As you listen, imagine the bustling streets of ancient Rome, the sound of marching legions, and the smell of the Mediterranean air. Feel the tension and excitement of Roman politics, and sense the dramatic shifts that forever changed the course of history. This journey will take us through a world where power, politics, and people collide. We will witness the birth of the Roman Empire, a transformation that began with Julius Caesar and his remarkable vision. And as you drift into slumber, we will explore the complexities of this world with a gentle, scholarly hand, allowing you to learn and reflect as you rest. By the time we reach the end of this journey, you will have a deeper understanding of not only Julius Caesar and his role in Roman history, but also of the grand narrative that shaped the civilization that would, for centuries, stand as a beacon of power and influence in the ancient world. Julius Caesar's life, one of remarkable ambition and historical significance, began in the year 100 BCE, Born into the patrician Julii family, his beginnings were far from humble. Though of noble lineage, the Julii were not among the most powerful families in Rome at the time. The Roman Republic, in the midst of its vast territorial expansion and political turbulence, was a world where status, connections, and ambition played pivotal roles in the ascent of its leading figures. Caesar's early life would lay the foundation for the extraordinary career that would soon follow, one that would reshape not only the political landscape of Rome, but the course of history itself. Caesar's father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, was a praetor, a position that placed him among the Roman elite, but did not bring the immense political power of a consul or senator. His mother, Aurelia Cotta, came from another respected family, though one that was equally distant from the true centers of power. Caesar's early childhood, therefore, was spent in a family that was connected but not at the forefront of Rome's politics. His father's premature death, when Caesar was just 16, thrust him into a more prominent role in the family. But the loss left him vulnerable in the volatile political environment of the Republic. The first significant challenge in Caesar's early life came when he was a teenager. At 18, during a turbulent period of Roman history, Caesar was caught up in the political strife that defined Rome's late republic. In 82 BCE, the powerful general Lucius Cornelius Sulla, having just seized control of Rome, initiated a series of proscriptions, political purges that led to the execution or exile of many senators, equestrians, and prominent citizens who opposed his rule. The young Caesar, at this point a minor figure in the political landscape, was included on Sulla's list, marked for death due to his family's connections to Marius, a rival of Sulla. To escape certain death, Caesar was forced into hiding, and his life could have ended before it had truly begun. Yet, fate had other plans. Caesar was eventually pardoned, a decision that would shape the rest of his life. His early brush with death instilled in him a deep understanding of the ruthlessness of Roman politics, as well as a resolve to climb the ranks of Roman society, no matter the cost. As Caesar grew older, his intellectual and personal qualities began to emerge. His education was rooted in the classical studies of rhetoric, philosophy, and history, subjects valued by Roman aristocrats. He became fluent in Greek, which was the language of intellectuals and elites in the Mediterranean world. And he developed an early reputation for his oratorical skill. It was through these intellectual pursuits that Caesar began to carve out a niche for himself in Roman society. But he knew that in the cutthroat world of Roman politics, words alone would not be enough. At the age of 30, Caesar took the first steps toward achieving his political aspirations. His entry into politics was carefully calculated, as he sought to establish alliances with powerful men who could help him achieve his goals. His first significant political position was as a quaestor, a financial officer responsible for overseeing public funds and the military's treasury. It was a position that provided him with the opportunity to establish himself in Rome's political circles and build relationships with other prominent figures, including Pompey the Great and Crassus, two of the wealthiest and most influential men in Rome. By now, Caesar was learning to navigate the complex dynamics of Roman political life. The Senate, once the backbone of the Roman Republic, had grown increasingly corrupt, and rivalries between powerful generals and political factions had begun to destabilize the Republic. In the midst of this, Caesar's ambition continued to grow, and his desire to achieve more for himself and for Rome's future began to overshadow his initial modest goals. Despite his early connections, Caesar's ambition was not enough to ensure his success. He faced a significant challenge in the form of the conservative faction in the Senate, led by the Optimates, who sought to preserve the old Roman traditions and resist the growing influence of popular leaders like Caesar. The Optimates were wary of Caesar's growing influence and sought to block his rise to power. To overcome this, Caesar realized that he needed something more, something that would give him the power and influence he needed to push past the political obstacles that stood in his way. And so, Caesar made a calculated decision. In 69 BCE, he embarked on a journey to Spain, where he served as a governor. This experience would prove crucial, for it gave him the opportunity to gain valuable military experience, build a loyal following among his soldiers, and, most importantly, raised the funds necessary to build a political base of his own. During his time in Spain, Caesar not only honed his military skills, but also solidified his reputation as a man of action, capable of inspiring loyalty and gaining victories on the battlefield. When Caesar returned to Rome, he was no longer the same young politician who had first entered the political scene. He had become a seasoned and ambitious man, ready to take the next step toward his ultimate goal, power. His early years had been marked by personal loss, political intrigue, and military experience, all of which would prepare him for the monumental challenges he would soon face as he sought to transform Rome into a new kind of state, one that would be ruled not by a senate of competing factions, but by one man, Julius Caesar himself. As we reflect on Caesar's early years, we see a man shaped by adversity, intellect, and ambition. His path to power was not straightforward, nor was it guaranteed. It was a journey filled with uncertainty, but it was also a journey that laid the groundwork for the incredible transformation that would soon unfold in the heart of the Roman Empire. The early years of Caesar's life and career set the stage for the dramatic events that would follow. As we continue, we will explore how Caesar's military career, his strategic alliances, and his political maneuvering led him to the height of power, as well as the challenges he faced along the way. The story of Caesar's rise is a story of ambition, power, and the ultimate quest to leave an indelible mark on history. As we move further into Julius Caesar's life, we encounter the next key phase in his journey, his military career. This was not merely a chapter of armed conflict, but a time when Caesar honed the skills that would make him one of the most celebrated and feared military leaders in history. His time in the military would also shape his political future, as it allowed him to build a reputation and gather a loyal following that would be instrumental in his rise to power. Let us explore how his early military experiences played a critical role in his ascent. Caesar's first major military command came in 81 BCE, when he was appointed to serve in Asia Minor, under the command of the governor of the province. However, it was not just his service in Asia that would leave a lasting impact on Caesar. It was the experience of the military campaigns that would mold him into a tactician and leader of exceptional skill. He gained firsthand experience of Roman military strategy, but more importantly, he learned the significance of loyalty among soldiers. His relationship with his troops would become one of the hallmarks of his leadership. During his service, Caesar earned several commendations for his bravery, and his reputation grew. But his political career was still in its early stages, and his aspirations were not yet fully realized. It was in 69 BCE, after serving as quaestor in Spain, that Caesar took his first significant political steps toward military leadership. His governorship of the province of Hispania Ulterior, modern-day western Spain, marked a turning point. It was here that Caesar would demonstrate his military acumen, not just through success in battle, but through the strategic alliances he forged. The local tribes had long resisted Roman control, but Caesar, showing a rare understanding of diplomacy, managed to secure their allegiance. His ability to win over these people and his handling of the province's administration solidified his place as a promising figure within Roman politics. The conquest of Gaul, however, would prove to be the defining chapter of Caesar's military career. This campaign, which began in 58 BCE, would make him a household name in Rome, though not initially for the reasons he had hoped. Gaul, a region roughly corresponding to modern-day France, was a vast and diverse land filled with numerous tribes. Rome had long coveted the area, and it was viewed as an essential part of expanding Rome's influence over the Western world. Caesar, as governor of the Roman province of Gaul, was tasked with overseeing this ambitious military venture. At the time, Caesar's political rivals in Rome were skeptical of his abilities. His rise had been fast, and the Senate saw him as a threat, a man whose ambition could lead to instability in the Republic. But Caesar was determined to prove himself, both as a military leader and as a politician. He utilized the command in Gaul as both a platform for military conquest and a springboard for gaining political leverage. It was here that he crafted the famous military narrative that would solidify his reputation in Rome and elevate him to the rank of a true military genius. Caesar's success in Gaul can be attributed to several factors. First, his ability to command and inspire loyalty in his soldiers was unparalleled. The Roman legions, though famed for their discipline and effectiveness, were often led by generals who relied on fear or punishment. Caesar, however, understood the importance of fostering loyalty through respect. His soldiers were not just tools of war, they were his allies, and he treated them as such. This approach gave him a distinct advantage, as his troops fought for him with a commitment and zeal that was unmatched. Second, Caesar's tactical brilliance on the battlefield was instrumental. His battles, such as the famous Siege of Alesia in 52 BCE, were marked by a blend of strategic foresight and adaptability. Caesar's ability to predict and counter his enemies' movements, coupled with his ingenious use of the terrain and resources, allowed him to consistently outmaneuver the Gallic tribes. By the time his campaigns in Gaul had concluded in 51 BCE, Caesar had effectively expanded Rome's borders to the English Channel and the Rhine River, a feat that no other Roman general had accomplished. Yet, despite these remarkable military successes, Caesar's growing power in Gaul had profound political consequences. His victories began to make him a hero in the eyes of the Roman people, who saw him as the man who had expanded Rome's dominion and brought glory to the Republic. However, his popularity alarmed the Senate, and many of the traditionalists viewed him as a dangerous upstart who threatened the balance of power. In Rome, political rivalries were intensifying. The Senate, led by conservative factions, viewed Caesar's increasing power with suspicion. They feared that he might attempt to seize control of Rome and undermine the authority of the Senate, which traditionally held the reins of government. For Caesar, this fear was both a challenge and an opportunity. His military success had given him the platform to challenge the traditional Roman political order, and he soon realized that in order to cement his place in Roman politics, he would need more than just military victories. He would need to forge powerful alliances. It was at this point that Caesar formed the first triumvirate with two other prominent Roman figures, Pompey the Great and Crassus, a wealthy Roman politician. This informal political alliance, though built on mutual self-interest, gave Caesar the support he needed to further his ambitions. With Pompey's military fame and Crassus's wealth, Caesar was able to gain the consulship in 59 BCE, a political position that would grant him the authority to pursue his agenda. By the time Caesar returned to Rome in 49 BCE, after completing his conquest of Gaul, his political trajectory had taken an irreversible course. He was no longer the young military leader seeking recognition. He had become one of the most powerful men in the Roman world, with an army loyal to him and a political base in Rome that was growing ever stronger. The traditional Roman elites, fearing his consolidation of power, attempted to curb his influence. But Caesar's rise was unstoppable. The stage was set for the next dramatic phase in his journey, the crossing of the Rubicon and the onset of civil war. Caesar's military career, particularly his conquest of Gaul, was not merely about territorial expansion or personal glory. It was about laying the groundwork for his political future. Through his strategic brilliance, his unrelenting ambition, and his deep understanding of the needs of his soldiers, Caesar crafted a legacy that would last long after his death. His military career set him on a path toward Rome's political throne, where he would reshape the course of history in ways no one could have anticipated. As we move forward, we will explore the events that followed Caesar's return to Rome, his decision to cross the Rubicon, and the ensuing civil war that would change the Roman Republic forever. But for now, we reflect on the military career that shaped his destiny, one that left an indelible mark on Rome and the world beyond. Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul remains one of the most significant military campaigns in history. Not only did it expand Rome's territorial reach to its greatest extent, but it also solidified Caesar's position as one of the most influential figures in Roman history. Over the course of 8 years, from 58 BCE to 50 BCE, Caesar fought a series of battles against various Gallic tribes, and in doing so, transformed the political landscape of Rome. His successes in Gaul made him a hero to the Roman populace, but also set in motion events that would lead to the eventual collapse of the Roman Republic. At the time, Caesar was assigned command of the Roman provinces of Gaul. The region was far from unified. Gaul was inhabited by several Celtic tribes, many of whom were in constant conflict with one another. Rome had a history of attempting to exert influence over Gaul, but its efforts had been intermittent and generally unsuccessful. Caesar's opportunity came when the Gallic tribes found themselves under increasing pressure from the Germanic tribes to the east, particularly the Suebi, led by the formidable King Ariovistus. This threat was more than enough to spark Roman intervention, and Caesar, eager to prove his military capabilities and expand Rome's dominion, seized the opportunity. In 58 BCE, Caesar embarked on his first campaign in Gaul against the Helvetii, a Celtic tribe that sought to migrate through Roman territory. After a swift and decisive victory, Caesar's reputation as a commander began to grow, but it was his subsequent campaigns that would truly define his legacy. Over the next several years, he fought a series of complex military engagements, each more challenging than the last, against tribes such as the Belgae, the Veneti, and the Nervii. Each victory not only brought vast swathes of land under Roman control, but also served to enhance Caesar's image as a military genius. The key to Caesar's success lay in his innovative use of tactics, his understanding of the terrain, and, most importantly, his relationship with his soldiers. Caesar's legions were fiercely loyal to him, a loyalty he cultivated through both respect and strategic leadership. Unlike many Roman generals who ruled through fear and harsh discipline, Caesar developed strong personal bonds with his soldiers. He shared in their hardships, worked alongside them, and often made decisions that directly benefited their welfare. In return, his soldiers fought with an almost fanatical devotion, and this mutual trust played a critical role in Caesar's success on the battlefield. One of the most famous battles of the Gallic Wars was the Siege of Alesia in 552 BCE, a turning point in Caesar's campaign. The Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix had united many of the Gallic tribes in a last-ditch effort to resist Roman domination. Vercingetorix, seeing that he could not defeat Caesar in open battle, retreated to the fortified hilltop of Alesia, where he hoped to withstand a siege. Caesar, recognizing that a prolonged siege could drain his resources, took decisive action. He built an elaborate series of fortifications around Alesia, blocking off any possibility of reinforcements for Vercingetorix. As the siege dragged on, Caesar's legions endured hardships of their own, but he maintained control over his men, using both military strategy and his understanding of the enemy's psychology to outmaneuver Vercingetorix. In the end, the siege ended in victory for Caesar, as Vercingetorix surrendered, and many of the Gallic tribes gave in to Roman rule. The success at Alesia, along with his subsequent campaigns, brought Caesar immense prestige. However, the consequences of his conquests were far-reaching. Caesar's actions in Gaul had a profound impact on both Rome and its political dynamics. In Rome, his growing popularity among the people and his military success began to stir anxiety among the Senate and the ruling elites. While Caesar's victories in Gaul were celebrated by the Roman public, the Senate saw his increasing influence as a threat to their authority. Caesar, in turn, began to see the Senate as an obstacle to his ambitions. But Caesar's influence was not limited to the political realm. The conquest of Gaul also brought with it tremendous economic benefits. The wealth generated from the spoils of war flowed into Rome, providing Caesar with the financial resources to fund his future political ambitions. His conquests also provided Rome with access to new resources, such as gold, slaves, and agricultural products, further strengthening the city's position in the Mediterranean world. At the same time, Caesar's conquest of Gaul had a profound cultural impact. Rome had long viewed itself as a superior civilization, and the Roman people had a deeply ingrained sense of pride in their military prowess. Caesar's victories in Gaul not only affirmed Roman dominance over the barbarian tribes of the north, but also reinforced the idea of Roman exceptionalism. His success in Gaul reinforced the belief that Rome's destiny was to rule the known world, and Caesar was seen as the man who could bring this vision to fruition. As Caesar's victories in Gaul continued to mount, so too did the sense of rivalry and mistrust between him and his political enemies in Rome. In 50 BCE, Caesar's term as governor of Gaul came to an end, and the Senate, fearful of his growing power, ordered him to disband his legions and return to Rome. Caesar faced a crucial decision. whether to obey the Senate's command or to take a more drastic step that would change the course of Roman history forever. It was at this moment, in 49 BCE, that Caesar made his fateful choice. In defiance of the Senate's order, he crossed the Rubicon River with his army, a bold move that would lead to a civil war between Caesar and the forces loyal to the Senate. The phrase, crossing the Rubicon, has since entered the lexicon as a symbol of irrevocable action, one that once taken cannot be undone. The decision to cross the Rubicon marked the end of Caesar's military campaigns in Gaul and the beginning of a new chapter in Roman history. It set the stage for a conflict that would not only reshape the political order of Rome, but also leave a lasting legacy in the annals of history. Caesar's conquest of Gaul had not only expanded the boundaries of the Roman Empire, but had also made him the central figure in the power struggles that would define the final years of the Roman Republic. As we move forward, we will explore the consequences of Caesar's decision to cross the Rubicon and the civil war that followed, leading to the eventual dissolution of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. In January 49 BCE, Julius Caesar made a fateful decision that would forever alter the course of Roman history. He crossed the Rubicon River with his legions, a bold and irreversible act that led directly to civil war. The phrase crossing the Rubicon has since come to symbolize a point of no return, an irreversible action that changes everything that follows. Caesar's decision to defy the Senate and march on Rome was not just a military maneuver. It was a declaration of his intent to reshape the future of the Roman Republic. At this juncture, Caesar had already achieved significant military success in Gaul, and his name had become synonymous with Roman power and military excellence. However, despite his military achievements, Caesar's political situation in Rome was increasingly precarious. His relationship with the Senate, particularly the conservative faction known as the Optimates, had become tense. The Senate had grown fearful of Caesar's rising influence and the loyalty he commanded from his soldiers. For many in the Senate, Caesar's power threatened the traditional order of Roman politics, where power had been concentrated in the hands of the Senate and the consuls. Caesar's term as governor of Gaul had come to an end, and the Senate, in an effort to curtail his influence, demanded that he disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. This demand was a clear attempt to strip Caesar of the power and support he had built during his campaigns in Gaul. The Senate expected Caesar to comply, but they had miscalculated. Caesar knew that disbanding his legions would leave him vulnerable to his political enemies. He also recognized that his personal ambition and the political future of Rome were inextricably linked. In the face of this demand, Caesar made the bold choice to march on Rome, but the decision was not made lightly. The Rubicon River, a small but significant boundary in northern Italy, marked the point where a Roman general could not legally cross with his army. The act of crossing the Rubicon with a military force was considered an act of insurrection, a declaration of war against the Roman state. By doing so, Caesar was effectively declaring himself an enemy of the Senate, and there was no turning back. The phrase, "the die is cast," is attributed to Caesar as he crossed the Rubicon, symbolizing his understanding that once the decision was made, the consequences would be irreversible. Caesar's move was both a bold gamble and a calculated strategy. He was not only asserting his power, but also testing the loyalty of the Roman people and the military. Would his soldiers remain loyal to him? Would the people of Rome rally behind him? Or would they side with the Senate and its defenders? Caesar's decision to march on Rome set in motion the civil war between his forces and those loyal to the Senate, led by Pompey the Great, who had once been Caesar's ally. The two men, once part of the first triumvirate, now found themselves on opposite sides of a bitter conflict. Pompey, with his military prestige and influence in Rome, commanded a significant portion of the Senate's army. However, Caesar had the advantage of being in control of the loyalty of his legions, a loyalty forged through years of military campaigns and personal rapport with his soldiers. The initial phase of the Civil War saw rapid developments. Caesar's swift advance into Italy caught Pompey off guard. As Caesar's army moved south, many of Pompey's allies in the Senate defected, fearing the power of Caesar's legions. Pompey, realizing that he could not successfully defend Rome, retreated to the south of Italy and ultimately fled to the eastern provinces, seeking reinforcements from the armies stationed there. Caesar, in pursuit, followed Pompey's forces, but the true turning point of the conflict would come at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE. The Battle of Pharsalus, fought in the plains of Thessaly in modern-day Greece, was one of the most decisive moments of the Civil War. Caesar, despite being outnumbered, demonstrated his strategic brilliance once again. His forces decisively defeated Pompey's army, and Pompey himself fled to Egypt, seeking asylum. However, the Egyptian court, under the rule of the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, saw Pompey's defeat as an opportunity to align with Caesar, the new power in Rome. Tragically, Pompey was assassinated by agents of the Egyptian court as he arrived at the shores of Egypt in 48 BCE, marking the end of his political and military career. Caesar's victory at Pharsalus was a watershed moment in the Civil War. With Pompey's defeat, Caesar became the undisputed leader of Rome, though he still faced resistance from remnants of Pompey's supporters and other factions within the Senate. Over the next few years, Caesar would consolidate his power, using both military force and political maneuvering to solidify his position as the master of Rome. One of the most remarkable aspects of Caesar's approach during the Civil War was his treatment of his enemies. While he was ruthless when necessary, he also demonstrated clemency to those who surrendered or sought peace. His clemency was not just a strategic decision. It was also a reflection of his belief that his ultimate goal was to restore order and stability to Rome, a city torn apart by years of factionalism and civil strife. His policy of clemency earned him both admiration and resentment. Many of his enemies in the Senate saw his magnanimity as a form of political calculation, while others saw it as an indication that he intended to rule with a level of authority far greater than that which the Senate was willing to accept. By 46 BCE, Caesar had effectively defeated the last remnants of Pompey's supporters, and he returned to Rome as a hero. He was appointed Dictator Perpetuo, or Dictator for Life, a title that gave him unparalleled authority and marked the final step in his rise to total control over the Roman state. The Senate, which had once resisted him, now acknowledged his dominance, though many were deeply uncomfortable with his concentration of power. The Civil War had come at a great cost. The Roman Republic, already fragile and deeply divided, had been torn apart by years of internal conflict. Caesar's victory, while providing temporary stability, also exposed the deep flaws in the Republican system. The Senate, once the proud governing body of Rome, had been sidelined by Caesar's military victories and political maneuvering. The result of this war and Caesar's unprecedented rise to power would change the course of Roman history. As we reflect on the Civil War and Caesar's ultimate victory, we see a man who understood the significance of his actions and the consequences of his decisions. His march on Rome and the subsequent conflict were not merely about military strategy, but about seizing control of a crumbling system. Caesar's victory in the Civil War was the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic, and his eventual assassination in 44 BCE would mark the transition to the Roman Empire. In the next chapter, we will explore Caesar's rule as dictator, his reforms, and the profound changes he implemented in Rome. His time in power, though brief, left a lasting legacy that would shape the future of Rome and the world. With Caesar's victory in the Civil War, his rise to absolute power as dictator of Rome was solidified. The defeat of Pompey and his supporters left Caesar in control of the Republic, but his rule marked the beginning of significant changes. As dictator, Julius Caesar sought not only to consolidate his personal power, but also to enact a series of sweeping reforms that would affect the political, social, and economic landscape of Rome. His brief time in power would forever alter the course of Roman history. Upon returning to Rome after his final victory over Pompey's forces, Caesar was granted the title of Dictator Perpetuo, Dictator for Life, in 44 BCE. This title granted him extraordinary powers, which allowed him to override the traditional republican institutions. For many, this was a clear sign that Caesar intended to rule as a monarch, an unprecedented step in a republic that prided itself on its system of elected officials and shared power. For others, it was a necessary measure to bring stability to a Rome torn apart by civil war and factionalism. Caesar's reforms were multifaceted, and they spanned across various aspects of Roman life, from politics and the economy to religion and the calendar. These reforms were not merely the products of a power-hungry ruler, but reflected his vision for a new, more centralized and efficient Rome. In many ways, these changes would pave the way for the Roman Empire, a new form of governance that would dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. One of the most significant changes Caesar implemented was his reorganization of the Senate. Traditionally, the Senate had been composed of patricians, the Roman elite, and had been a body that wielded considerable influence over policy and governance. However, during Caesar's time, the Senate had become increasingly ineffective, divided, and corrupt. Caesar expanded the Senate to include a broader range of members, incorporating individuals from provincial areas and people with military experience. This was a radical departure from tradition, as it diluted the power of the old aristocracy and helped ensure Caesar's control over Roman politics. By increasing the number of senators and bringing in more loyal supporters, Caesar strengthened his own political base. Another area of Caesar's focus was land reform. In response to the growing disparity between the wealthy elites and the impoverished plebeians, Caesar implemented measures to redistribute land to the poor. One of his primary policies was the establishment of colonies in the provinces, where land was given to veterans of his military campaigns. This not only rewarded his soldiers for their loyalty, but also helped alleviate some of the social pressures caused by the growing inequality in Rome. Additionally, Caesar passed laws to limit the size of estates, aiming to reduce the power of the vast landholders who had long dominated Roman society. Economically, Caesar sought to address the challenges facing the Roman Republic after years of warfare and instability. One of his most famous economic reforms was the restructuring of the Roman calendar. Prior to Caesar's intervention, the Roman calendar had fallen out of sync with the solar year due to inconsistencies in the way it was calculated. Caesar introduced the Julian calendar in 45 BCE, aligning the months with the solar year and introducing the concept of a leap year. This reform not only provided a more accurate method of timekeeping, but also helped standardize the way Rome conducted its business, including the scheduling of elections, festivals, and agricultural activities. The Julian calendar remained in use in the Western world for over 1,600 years, until the Gregorian calendar was introduced in the 16th century. Caesar's reforms were not limited to administrative and economic changes. They also extended to the religious and social structures of Rome. He sought to restore Rome's moral values, which he believed had deteriorated during the Republic's later years. Caesar was deeply interested in the gods and saw his rule as part of a divine mandate. In 46 BCE, he held a series of grand celebrations, including a triumph over the Gauls, and publicly presented himself as the representative of Roman unity and prosperity. He also restructured the priesthoods, centralizing religious authority under his control. This religious reform helped solidify his image as both a political and divine leader. One of the most significant and controversial aspects of Caesar's dictatorship was his centralization of power. While he made significant reforms that benefited the plebeians and the military, his consolidation of authority alarmed many in Rome's political class. The Senate and the Roman elite, who had traditionally shared power with elected consuls and magistrates, grew increasingly wary of Caesar's intentions. His continuous extension of his own power, particularly of dictator Perpetuo, led some to fear that he was on the verge of establishing a monarchy, something Rome had long rejected. Despite these concerns, Caesar's reforms were immensely popular among the Roman people. His policies addressed many of the challenges facing the Republic, and his populist approach earned him the loyalty of the lower classes and the military. Caesar's popularity, however, only deepened the rift between him and the Senate. His detractors, fearing that he intended to become a tyrant, began plotting against him. Among those involved in the conspiracy was Brutus, a former ally and the son of one of Caesar's oldest friends. This betrayal would lead to the tragic events of 44 BCE, the assassination of Julius Caesar. In addition to his political and social reforms, Caesar also initiated a series of military and diplomatic endeavors that further extended Rome's influence. Caesar was keenly aware of the importance of military strength in maintaining Rome's dominance, and he worked to ensure the loyalty of the legions. He also focused on securing Roman interests abroad, particularly in the Eastern Mediterranean, where he sought to strengthen Rome's relationships with client kings and local rulers. These diplomatic initiatives helped cement Rome's power in the region and ensured that the Republic's military forces remained formidable. While Caesar's reforms were significant, they were ultimately too radical for some factions of Roman society. The Senate, in particular, felt that Caesar's dominance threatened the very foundations of the Roman Republic. His political opponents, who had long been at odds with his rise to power, saw his increasing control as a danger to their privileges and influence. This culminated in the fateful conspiracy that would end Caesar's life, an event that would bring the Republic to its final, inevitable collapse. As we reflect on Caesar's reign as dictator, we see a leader who sought to remake Rome in his own image. His reforms were aimed at strengthening the state, addressing economic inequalities, and creating a more efficient and centralized government. However, the same centralization of power that made his rule effective also led to his downfall. Caesar's legacy is complex. While his reforms laid the groundwork for the Roman Empire, they also exposed the fragility of the Roman Republic. His brief time as dictator would ultimately serve as the final chapter in the Republic's history and the prelude to the rise of the Roman Empire. In the next chapter, we will explore the conspiracy against Caesar, the events leading to his assassination, and the aftermath that shaped the future of Rome. As Julius Caesar's power continued to grow, so did the unease among the Roman Senate and the political elites of Rome. While Caesar's reforms were popular among the common people and his military successes ensured the loyalty of his legions, many senators viewed his centralization of power as a direct threat to the Republic. The very institution that had governed Rome for centuries, the Senate, was now overshadowed by a single individual who, many feared, was positioning himself as a king in all but name. Caesar's rise to dictator perpetuo in 44 BCE was the final straw for many of his political opponents. To the senators, this title was not only an affront to the Republic's long-standing tradition of shared power, but also a sign that Caesar's ambitions had transcended those of any Roman leader before him. Caesar, with his massive personal popularity and military power, had effectively rendered the Senate a mere rubber stamp for his policies. His reforms, while beneficial to many, were seen as steps toward absolute rule, steps that threatened the very essence of Roman governance. The fear that Caesar's rule would eventually lead to the establishment of a monarchy was a recurring concern among the Senate's conservative faction, the Optimates. This faction had long been in opposition to the populist policies of Caesar and other leaders like him. For the Optimates, the Senate was the cornerstone of Roman liberty, and the idea that one man could hold absolute power was anathema to everything they had fought to preserve. In this climate of fear and suspicion, a conspiracy began to take shape, one that would forever alter the course of Roman history. The conspiracy against Caesar was not an isolated plot by a few disgruntled senators. It was a widespread movement among the Roman elite, comprising both those who had personal grievances against Caesar and those who genuinely believed that the Republic could not survive under his rule. Among the leaders of this conspiracy were some of the most respected figures in Roman politics, including Brutus and Cassius, both of whom had close personal ties to Caesar. Brutus, in particular, had been one of Caesar's trusted allies, and his mother, Servilia, had been a lover of Caesar in the past. The fact that Brutus was so intimately connected to Caesar only added to the tragedy of the betrayal. The motivations of the conspirators were complex. On the one hand, some were driven by a genuine belief in the preservation of the Roman Republic. They saw Caesar's actions as leading Rome down a dangerous path, one that could result in the erosion of the Republic's traditional checks and balances. On the other hand, many of the conspirators were motivated by self-interest, particularly by a fear of losing their own power and influence in a system dominated by Caesar. These senators saw Caesar as a threat to their social standing, and they believed that only by removing him could they restore the balance of power. The decision to assassinate Caesar was not taken lightly. It was a plan that involved dozens of senators and prominent Roman figures, each of whom had different reasons for participating. The conspirators, however, were united in their belief that Caesar's death would be the only way to restore the Republic. The plot was carefully orchestrated, and the assassins knew that they would have to act quickly and decisively. The Senate, which was to meet on the Ides of March 15th, was the designated venue for the assassination. The conspirators planned to ambush Caesar during the Senate session, where they would strike him down in full view of the Roman Senate. Caesar, however, was not unaware of the growing conspiracies against him. He had received numerous warnings from friends, colleagues, and even soothsayers, all cautioning him about the danger he faced. One of the most famous omens occurred shortly before the Ides of March, when a soothsayer told Caesar to beware the Ides of March. Despite this warning, Caesar chose to attend the Senate meeting that day, a decision that would prove to be his undoing. Some have speculated that Caesar's decision to go to the Senate was a display of his confidence and power. By appearing in the Senate chamber, he was asserting his belief that he was untouchable, beyond the reach of his enemies. On the day of the assassination, Caesar entered the Senate chamber with a sense of inevitability. The conspirators, disguised as ordinary senators, were gathered around him. As Caesar took his seat, the attack was launched. The assassins struck in unison, each delivering a blow to the dictator. According to ancient accounts, Caesar was stabbed 23 times, a brutal and symbolic act that represented the death of the Republic as much as it did the death of its leader. When Caesar saw that Brutus, his once trusted ally, was among the conspirators, he is said to have uttered the famous words, "Et tu, Brute?" And you, Brutus? This phrase has come to symbolize the ultimate betrayal, the deep personal hurt of being betrayed by someone so close. The assassination of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March was a moment of profound significance for Rome. It marked the violent end of a period of great political upheaval, and many believed it would restore the Republic. Yet, the aftermath of Caesar's death proved to be more chaotic than anyone had anticipated. Rather than returning power to the Senate and restoring the old order, Caesar's assassination unleashed a new wave of civil war and political instability. The conspirators had hoped that by killing Caesar, they would weaken his supporters and bring an end to his regime. But instead, they sparked a struggle for power that would soon lead to the rise of Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, and the establishment of the Roman Empire. The consequences of Caesar's assassination were far-reaching. Rome, once governed by a system of elected officials and shared power, would never be the same. The death of Caesar set the stage for the final collapse of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. The Senate, weakened by years of infighting and political manipulation, could not prevent the rise of a new authoritarian leader. In many ways, Caesar's assassination, though intended to preserve the Republic, only hastened its demise. As we reflect on the events surrounding Caesar's death, we are reminded of the precarious nature of power in Rome. Caesar's rise, his reforms, and his eventual assassination underscore the tension between the desire for order and the forces of ambition and loyalty. His legacy, though tragically cut short, would continue to shape Roman history for generations. In the next chapter, we will examine the aftermath of Caesar's death, the rise of his heir Augustus, and the transformation of the Roman state from republic to empire. The death of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March, 44 BCE, was not simply the end of a man's life. It was the end of an era in Rome. The events surrounding his assassination, the chaos that followed, and the power vacuum it created were pivotal moments in history. Caesar's assassination was intended to restore the Roman Republic, yet it inadvertently hastened the demise of the very system of government that his enemies claimed to protect. The Ides of March marks one of the most dramatic turning points in Roman history, a moment that would forever change the future of the Mediterranean world. On the morning of March 15th, Caesar entered the Senate House at the Theater of Pompey, fully aware of the dangerous political climate that had developed around him. In the days leading up to the Ides of March, warnings had come from various sources, including the soothsayer who famously warned him to beware the Ides of March. Yet Caesar, ever confident in his power and resilience, dismissed the omen. The conspirators, meanwhile, prepared for the moment when they would strike. The conspirators against Caesar were a group of senators, including some of Caesar's most trusted allies. Brutus, who had once been a supporter and even a possible heir to Caesar's political legacy, was among the leaders of the plot. Brutus had been close to Caesar, and his involvement in the assassination is often seen as one of the most poignant aspects of the betrayal. Many saw Brutus as the moral center of the conspiracy, believing that his actions would restore the traditional power of the Senate and end Caesar's dictatorial rule. The conspiracy was not just driven by personal grievances, but by a genuine belief that the Republic, with its systems of checks and balances, had been undermined by Caesar's concentration of power. The plot was carefully coordinated. The conspirators had ensured that they would strike during a meeting of the Senate, where they could attack Caesar in full view of the public. The Senate, which was supposed to be a forum for debate and governance, would now become the site of an act of treason, a public assassination. The timing was deliberate. Caesar was to appear before the Senate, where he would receive what was supposed to be a ceremonial petition. Little did he know that the petition was a cover for the fatal blow that would come from behind. As Caesar entered the Senate, the conspirators surrounded him. They initially posed as loyal senators, and Caesar, ever confident, believed that his safety was assured. He was unaware of the danger lurking behind him. The first to strike was Casca, who attacked Caesar with a dagger. The attack was swift but not fatal. As the blows rained down, Caesar attempted to defend himself, but the conspirators were relentless, and Caesar was soon overwhelmed. It was at this moment that the most famous words in Roman history were uttered. When Caesar saw that Brutus, his trusted friend and one of the plotters, was among the assassins, he reportedly said, "Et tu, Brute?" And you, Brutus. This phrase, laden with personal betrayal, has since become synonymous with the deepest form of treachery. Caesar was stabbed 23 times, a brutal and symbolic death. His body, lying in the Senate house, was left as a testament to the violence and chaos that had engulfed Rome. While some in the Senate believed that Caesar's assassination would bring about a return to the Republic, the reality was far different. The murder of Caesar plunged Rome into further turmoil and set the stage for more civil conflict. The power vacuum left in the wake of his death would lead to the rise of new leaders, most notably Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later Augustus, and the eventual transformation of Rome from a republic to an empire. In the immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination, confusion and fear spread throughout Rome. While the conspirators expected the Senate to regain control, the response was far from what they had anticipated. The Roman people, who had long admired Caesar for his military victories, his reforms, and his leadership, did not rise up in support of the Senate. Instead, they mourned Caesar's death, and his supporters quickly began to mobilize. One of the most immediate responses came from Mark Antony, Caesar's close ally and co-consul at the time of his assassination. Mark Antony had been a loyal supporter of Caesar and had long served as his right-hand man. He saw Caesar's death as a personal loss and a grave threat to the stability of Rome. In the days following the assassination, Antony sought to consolidate his own power and position himself as the heir to Caesar's legacy. Antony's most famous move was his powerful speech at Caesar's funeral, which was aimed at turning public sentiment against the conspirators. In his speech, Antony skillfully used rhetoric to incite the crowd, reading Caesar's will aloud, which revealed that Caesar had left substantial wealth and land to the people of Rome. The speech sparked an uprising, and the mob turned against the conspirators, forcing them to flee. The Senate, which had hoped that Caesar's assassination would restore the Republic, now found itself vulnerable to the wrath of the people. As chaos erupted in Rome, the conspirators realized that they had not restored the Republic. They had only set the stage for further conflict. The assassination of Caesar had failed to accomplish its intended goal. Rather than returning power to the Senate, it had triggered a new wave of civil war. The political order in Rome was now deeply unsettled, and the old structures of the Republic were unable to hold. The events following Caesar's assassination marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. With the Senate in disarray, Antony and Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, began to vie for power. Octavian, though young and inexperienced, was a shrewd political operator. In the years following Caesar's death, he would use his position as Caesar's adopted son to build a formidable political and military force. The rivalry between Antony and Octavian would eventually lead to a decisive conflict, the Battle of Actium, where Octavian would emerge victorious and secure his place as the first emperor of Rome, ushering in the Roman Empire. In the wake of Caesar's assassination, Rome was plunged into a period of instability, but it was also a period of opportunity. Caesar's death had created a power vacuum, and new leaders like Octavian and Antony would fight for control. This period of chaos would ultimately lead to the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of a new system of government under Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The death of Julius Caesar, far from being the final chapter in the story of Rome, set the stage for the transformation of the Republic into an empire. As we continue, we will explore the aftermath of Caesar's death, the rise of Augustus, and how the events surrounding Caesar's assassination reshaped the future of Rome and the Mediterranean world. The assassination of Julius Caesar marked a critical juncture in Roman history, but it did not spell the end of his influence. In fact, Caesar's death set into motion a series of events that would ultimately culminate in the establishment of the Roman Empire, a legacy of imperial rule that would endure for centuries. Although Caesar himself was no longer alive to see the outcome, his actions and reforms left an indelible mark on Roman politics and society, paving the way for the rise of a new political system under his adopted heir, Octavian. At the time of his death, Caesar's power was unrivaled. He had become the undisputed ruler of Rome, and his control over the army and the political apparatus of the Republic was absolute. Yet his assassination was the catalyst for a power struggle that would engulf Rome in further civil wars, destabilizing the Republic and ultimately leading to its collapse. The senators who killed Caesar hoped that by removing him, they could restore the Republic and return to the old system of governance. However, they vastly underestimated the momentum Caesar had created, both politically and militarily. In the months following Caesar's death, Rome became a battleground of competing forces, with Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant, and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, emerging as the principal contenders for power. While the Senate initially attempted to reassert its authority, it quickly became clear that it could not maintain control in the face of such formidable opposition. Antony, a seasoned general, and Octavian, with his inherited political legitimacy as Caesar's adopted son, each sought to claim Caesar's legacy. In the face of their rivalry, the Senate's authority continued to erode. One of the first significant events after Caesar's death was the formation of the Second Triumvirate in 43 BCE. This political alliance, composed of Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, was created to avenge Caesar's assassination and to divide the power in Rome. While the triumvirs initially succeeded in eliminating the conspirators who had killed Caesar, the power struggle between Antony and Octavian soon became the central conflict. Octavian's political acumen and his ability to gain popular support gradually allowed him to edge out Antony, despite the latter's military prowess. The Battle of Actium, fought in 31 BCE, was the decisive moment in this rivalry. Octavian's forces defeated Antony and his ally, Cleopatra of Egypt, in a naval battle that marked the end of the civil wars. Antony and Cleopatra, both of whom committed suicide after their defeat, left Octavian as the sole ruler of Rome. In 27 BCE, Octavian was given the title of Augustus by the Senate, officially marking the beginning of the Roman Empire. As the first emperor, Augustus consolidated power and reformed the political structure of Rome, ensuring that the monarchy would endure. Although Caesar did not live to see the empire he unwittingly helped create, his influence was undeniable. His actions, from his military conquests to his reforms in governance, directly contributed to the political shift that allowed Augustus to become the first emperor of Rome. Caesar's reforms had already begun the process of centralizing power, and his establishment of a strong, loyal army and his popular support among the people made it possible for a single individual to hold supreme authority. One of Caesar's most important legacies was his creation of the imperial system. While he did not directly establish an empire, his reign set the stage for Augustus's eventual consolidation of power. Caesar had already assumed many of the powers associated with monarchy, such as controlling the army, issuing laws by decree, and centralizing political authority in his own hands. The title of Dictator Perpetuo, which Caesar held, was a clear sign that Rome's republican system had been irrevocably altered. In practice, Caesar's reign had already begun the transition from a republic with elected officials to a system dominated by a single leader. Moreover, Caesar's military conquests, particularly in Gaul, had significantly expanded Rome's territorial holdings, laying the groundwork for the Roman Empire's vast borders. Under Augustus, Rome would consolidate and expand upon these conquests, eventually becoming the most powerful empire the ancient world had ever seen. The Roman legions, which had been loyal to Caesar, would continue to serve under Augustus and subsequent emperors, ensuring the continued military strength of the empire. On the social and political front, Caesar's reforms also helped to secure his lasting influence. His land reforms and his efforts to redistribute land to veterans and the poor were seen as steps to address some of the Republic's most pressing issues. By granting land to his soldiers, Caesar ensured the loyalty of his army, which would become a powerful political tool in the future. His changes to the Roman calendar, which introduced the Julian calendar, also had a lasting impact. The calendar, with its leap year and 365 days, became the foundation of the calendar system still in use today, in slightly modified form. Another significant aspect of Caesar's legacy was his centralization of power. He reduced the power of the Senate and concentrated authority in his own hands. While Augustus would later formalize this concentration of power into the system of the Principate, Caesar's rule had already established the precedent for a single ruler controlling the political apparatus of Rome. Augustus, though careful to maintain the illusion of a republic, would rule with much of the same authority Caesar had wielded. The assassination of Julius Caesar, therefore, did not result in the restoration of the republic, but in the further consolidation of power into the hands of a single ruler. The hope that his death would revive the old Roman system was misguided, as it quickly became clear that the republic was too fractured and weakened to survive. Caesar's legacy was not one of restoring traditional governance, but of creating a new form of government, one in which the emperor held supreme authority, a system that would last for centuries. As we reflect on Caesar's legacy, we are reminded that his impact on Rome and the world was profound. His military genius, political acumen, and reforms transformed Roman society and paved the way for the Roman Empire. Though his life was short, his legacy lived on through his adopted heir, Augustus, and the empire that he established. The reign of Julius Caesar marked the end of the Roman Republic, but it also heralded the beginning of an empire that would leave an indelible mark on world history. In the next chapter, we will explore the final transformation of Rome, from the Republic to the Roman Empire under the leadership of Augustus, and examine the enduring legacy of Julius Caesar's rule. The assassination of Julius Caesar on the Ides of March in 44 BCE was a watershed moment in Roman history, signaling not the restoration of the Republic as the conspirators hoped, but the irreversible end of the Roman Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. In the aftermath of Caesar's death, Rome found itself in a state of turmoil, marked by civil war, political intrigue, and shifting alliances. Yet, it was through this chaos that Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, emerged as the singular force capable of consolidating power and establishing a new order for Rome, one that would last for centuries. The immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination was marked by confusion and disarray. The Senate, despite having played a key role in the murder of Caesar, found itself powerless in the face of the political forces that had been set in motion. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant, sought to avenge his death, while Octavian, Caesar's young and ambitious heir, positioned himself as the rightful successor to Caesar's legacy. Both men were determined to secure their place at the top of Roman politics, but they soon realized that cooperation, not conflict, would be their only path to success. In 43 BCE, Antony and Octavian, along with a third figure, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate, a political alliance intended to avenge Caesar's death and bring stability to Rome. The triumvirs wielded extraordinary power, granting them the ability to execute or exile political enemies without the need for Senate approval. They moved quickly to eliminate those who had been involved in Caesar's assassination, leading to a series of purges that further destabilized the Republic. Despite their shared objective of avenging Caesar's death, tensions soon began to surface between Antony and Octavian. Their rivalry would culminate in a power struggle that would determine the future of Rome. The two men clashed both militarily and politically, but it was Octavian who proved to be the more politically savvy of the two. While Antony was engaged in military campaigns in the eastern Mediterranean, including his ill-fated alliance with Cleopatra of Egypt, Octavian used his position in Rome to consolidate power, build a strong base of support, and strengthen his political legitimacy. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE was the defining moment in this rivalry. The battle, fought off the coast of Greece, saw Octavian's fleet decisively defeat the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra. After the defeat, Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they both eventually committed suicide. With their deaths, Octavian emerged as the uncontested ruler of Rome, and the Roman Republic was no more. In 27 BCE, Octavian, now known as Augustus, was granted the title of Princeps, first citizen, by the Senate. This marked the formal end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus cleverly avoided taking the title of king or emperor, understanding the Roman aversion to monarchy. Instead, he maintained the outward appearance of a republic, with the Senate still holding nominal power. However, in practice, Augustus held absolute control over Roman governance, military affairs, and imperial expansion. Augustus's reign marked a dramatic shift in the political structure of Rome. Under his leadership, Rome transitioned from a republic with its often unwieldy checks and balances to a highly centralized empire. Augustus recognized that Rome's political system had been undermined by years of civil war, corruption, and factionalism. To restore stability, he took measures to reform and strengthen the state, ensuring that power was firmly in his hands. One of Augustus's greatest achievements was his reorganization of the military. He reformed the Roman legions, making them more professional and loyal to the emperor rather than to individual generals. This shift in loyalty ensured that the military would remain a tool of imperial power, not a force for political disruption. Augustus also established a permanent standing army, a far cry from the temporary military levies that had been used during the Republic. These reforms laid the foundation for the stability of the Roman Empire for centuries to come. In addition to military reforms, Augustus oversaw a vast building program that transformed Rome into a city of grandeur and sophistication. He famously declared that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Monuments, temples, and public buildings were constructed to reflect the glory of Rome, and the emperor himself became the symbol of Rome's prosperity and power. This physical transformation of Rome helped reinforce Augustus' legitimacy as the ruler of the empire. Social reforms were also a key aspect of Augustus' rule. He introduced laws aimed at improving the moral fabric of Roman society, such as laws encouraging marriage and family life, and penalizing adultery. Augustus also sought to promote traditional Roman values, positioning himself as the protector of Roman customs and religion. Under his reign, the Pax Romana, Roman peace, was established, a period of relative peace and stability that lasted for over 2 centuries. During this time, Rome expanded its borders, created a network of roads and trade routes, and experienced a flourishing of the arts and culture. While Augustus's reign was marked by the consolidation of imperial power, it was also a time of political and military stability. He cleverly balanced the appearance of republican institutions with the reality of autocratic rule, ensuring that the Senate remained functional, while in practice, the emperor controlled the political and military direction of the empire. Augustus's success in securing his power also set a precedent for future emperors who would follow his model of centralized rule. Yet, Augustus was also deeply aware of the need to maintain his legitimacy. He portrayed himself not as a monarch, but as the first citizen of Rome, a leader who respected the traditions of the Republic while ensuring the survival of the state. His careful management of his public image and his ability to maintain popular support ensured that his reign was relatively free of major opposition. Augustus also took great care to establish a clear line of succession, ensuring that his imperial legacy would be passed on to future generations. By the time of his death in 14 CE, Augustus had transformed Rome from a fractured and war-torn republic into a powerful, stable empire. His reign laid the foundation for the Julio-Claudian dynasty and for the imperial system that would endure for centuries. The Roman Empire, as it expanded under Augustus, would bring Roman law, culture, and governance to vast regions stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. Reflecting on the legacy of Julius Caesar, we see a man whose actions, though controversial and often seen as dictatorial, set the stage for the rise of the Roman Empire. Caesar's military conquests, his centralization of power, and his reforms all played a critical role in the transition from republic to empire. However, it was Augustus, Caesar's adopted heir, who was able to take Caesar's legacy and turn it into a lasting political system, one that would define the ancient world for centuries. The story of Caesar and the rise of the Roman Empire reminds us that political systems, even those as seemingly stable as the Roman Republic, can be fragile and subject to change. Caesar's life and death are a testament to the power of ambition, the complexities of governance, and the ways in which individual actions can shape the course of history. The transition from republic to empire may have been turbulent, but it was ultimately the result of the political realities of Rome, the ambitions of its leaders, and the need for a stable, centralized authority to guide the empire forward.